All right, Bobby, the 2025 regular season for college football is now in the rearview mirror with championships games completed. Bowl odds are out. Opt outs are up. Uh, but before we get into all of that, let's go ahead and talk about the most important game from Saturday, and that was Ohio State, Indiana. A completely different game than what I think you and I thought this would be. Ohio State got dominated on the offensive line. Indiana actually had 5 sacks. They created more tackles for loss. They created a lot of havoc. Sand's interception, my opinion, much worse than Mendoza's interception. Sand looked pretty pedestrian. Other thoughts on the game is just could not believe the pace of play. We're in the fourth quarter. Ryan Day is down. My expectation for this team was to go into juggernaut like they did last year for the playoff run and kind of treat this game like a playoff, with the conference championship on the line, assuming that meant something. It obviously didn't, but also getting that number 1 seed. They did not trigger juggernaut mode. They did not find that extra gear, despite Tate and Jeremiah Smith just getting open, dominating the corners. The out route was wide open all night. So Sand was clicking there. Obviously, the quarterback sneak, epic fail.
He's the worst at it.
With the knee going down. Also have to mention the run game and I don't see many of these with game on paper. Ohio State, negative EPA per rush in the 0 percentile. It's Ohio State football against Indiana, and they cannot get any sort of run game generated. Bobby, I apologize for the rant. Just super passionate about this game. I felt like Ohio State was so much more. It was a best bet for us. So, was obviously very invested, not just monetarily, but also for anybody that tells us or follows along. So, Bobby, with all that said, what are your thoughts on what were your thoughts, I guess, after this Big Ten championship?
I mean, as far as Ohio State on defense goes, we kind of got the run out I expected. As we mentioned, last week, Ohio State's defense was yet to allow 17 points in a game yet this season. They held Fernando Mendoza in Indiana to 13, and some of those points were created by his underrated and really good wide receiver group making awesome plays, awesome catches. Mendoza was very timely on a lot of throws. I know there was a particular third down, I forget when, but he left the pocket, scrambled, I believe, to the right, top of the screen, and just threw the sidearm pass for a first down. It's going to show up as a 9-yard play in the box score or whatever it was, but it was just key because IU was in there, kind of like around their own 20 or something like that. And they would have been a punt, in that situation. So it's just those timely throws that Mendoza made. It's kind of been an embodiment of his whole season as a whole, is making the, plays when needed, when asked for, even if, IU has won by margin in a ton of these games. But the Oregon game, bouncing back from the pick six, the Penn State game, that drive, again, helped by a ton of catches as well. But just making those key plays, and his box scores aren't going to pop out to you. Only one game this season with 300 yards passing from Mendoza. This one wasn't it either, so he obviously gets a decent chunk of credit, but I thought, Ryan Day and that staff was completely and utterly outcoached by SIG in Indiana. I thought the game plan, as you kind of mentioned, was really poor from Ohio State. Continuing to run clock late into the games, the 2 drives in that third quarter, 12 plays, third and fourth quarter, 12 plays, 70 yards, 7 minutes off the clock. That was the turnover on downs with the Sand, who's might be the worst quarterback sneaker of any quarterback on any level. And then the 15-play, 81 yards drive that went 8 minutes, but resulted in the missed chip shot field goal. Right. Which of course probably you obviously could have went for that one, but you probably were hesitant based on the first one. And that's just, again, Ryan Day turtling in that case. But that was when they started to figure out the Indiana defense, which has done a great job all game. They were finally able to put together and sustain 2 really nice back-to-back drives. Obviously, it took a while, but a friend of the program, Tailgate Tent, mentioned it in a tweet, Ohio State thought they could push that edge a little bit, treated the regular season when they were 30-point favorites in every game. Sure, play that slow. But, in these games against more like competition, which we're talking about Indiana's like competition for Ohio State here. But like mentioning that and saying you need to push your edge, you can't, try to win these low possession games. It creates more variance. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, came down to those two plays. Indiana did miss a field goal as well. So not just mention the Ohio State missed field goal. It really was that fourth down sneak play that flipped the game, probably flipped the point spread. But I think one of the biggest things that I saw in this game was the Indiana defensive line. Mentioned Julian Sayin sacked, I believe, 6 times this season going into this game, and was sacked 5 times against Indiana. In that one, really keeping him just off the whole game. Thought that was super impressive. That's what stood out to me and warranted, kind of an upgrade and going, oh, holy crap, like IU, kind of another pillar in this IU, like how legit is IU argument was obviously we talked about the Oregon game, what that meant for them as a program. This was another one where it's like, oh, like Ohio State's had a good offensive line all year. And here is something where it's like, oh no, they just beat them up in the trenches. And that was something that IU didn't do last year. And that was why they went 11-2 and lost the 2 games to the 2 best teams they played by far. But, at the end of the day, obviously market did close less. We kind of mentioned we didn't think we'd get CLV on that one, knowing some numbers would kind of back IU late.
Yep.
That certainly came. Would I bet Ohio State again at that number? Or at least at the close? I probably would in a rematch, thinking they come out with a different game plan. But man, I probably wouldn't do it as confidently. But big shout out to Indiana as a program. They deserved that. It was awesome for their fans. They wanted that badly, and so happy for them that they got that victory on the big stage, and they get to see that number 1 next to their name.
3 more points to make on this game, which I know is a lot because we want to do a short form show, but losing Omar Cooper on the first drive and Indiana able to make that adjustment, I think is amazing. I mean, you lose a guy that you're going to create plays for him. You're going to run a script. Obviously, is going to go to him. That's one of Mendoza's key security guys to throw to. And he's out, right? He rolls his ankle. He doesn't come back in the game. And to make the adjustments on the fly. And point number 2, Ohio State didn't. I think the middle 8 here is actually super key because my thought was, all right, Ohio State's going to get points here before the half, and then they get the ball to start the second half. Now is when they're going to put Indiana behind the 8 ball and force them to be more predictable on offense, getting them behind the sticks and behind the scoreboard. And that absolutely did not happen. I'm pretty sure, they just had to punt and just really poor. And then the last point that we need to talk about is just the Heisman race. Mendoza's clearly locked this thing up, but there was a point in the game that Diego Pavia was the favorite in this game. And so in an alternate universe, Diego Pavia wins the Heisman. If the kid from Ohio State makes the field goal, this game goes to overtime, Ohio State wins, and Julian Sayin wins ugly.
Do you think it's 100%? It's Mendoza?
Yeah. I don't see how it couldn't be. I mean, the Indiana story is too good a story.
I ultimately think that it's very close to 100, but if you looked at the stat line, it wasn't like wow for Mendoza. It was more like if you watched the game, you saw the individual throws.
Yeah.
But I think if someone just looks at the stats, they might see Pavia still. I think it could be a little bit closer. I think Mendoza wins this 95% of the time, but I could see a stats argument for Pavia still. But
you're absolutely right. To me, it's the narrative got lost because I think that Pavia had the stats. We also had this narrative, right? Vanderbilt's success story, but now it's all about Indiana. I mean, undefeated, first Big Ten championship.
You got you got
75
like
years or whatever it is.
you almost got like the Indiana, like the specific run out of Indiana still wins the game, but Mendoza doesn't win because they only scored 13 points. But that one deep throw to seal it probably did it on the final drive for them. But it's a very interesting case.
Charles in the chat, Mendoza losing would just be because no one wants to hear his acceptance speech. And I agree. I mean, the guy's pretty much a robot. So I'd much rather hear Pavia's acceptance speech and possibly have his whole family up on the stage and popping champagne bottles. That'd be
Mendoza reminds me of Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
Just a cornball.
For sure, man.
Good kid, good player. He's corny though.
All right, Bobby, let's put that one to bed. And let's talk about playoff reaction. My goodness, we have two G5 teams in the field. I was talking to you a little bit about this before the show. I feel like these two playoff games with Tulane and James Madison are just as meaningless as whatever bowl game that Kansas State and Iowa State would have gone to. What I mean by that is you got Bob Chesney, who's wanting to be, getting prepped for UCLA, and now he's a 3-touchdown underdog in Eugene. I mean, did they even try to keep it close? Like, what's the preparation like for that team? And then same for Tulane. I mean, John Summerall obviously trying to build a staff and everything, build the foundation at Florida versus a team who's going to play in conference on a regular basis. I just don't get the motivation for Tulane. Obviously, with the players, everyone can just kind of opt out, not opt out, but transfer out next season. Yeah, it's national TV. You still want to play for pride and all those types of things, but huge spreads. And there's really only one good game on the playoff bracket, the first Saturday there.
Yeah, I mean, we did kind of just start with the bracket in general. Obviously, like Twitter's just been an utter absolute cesspool with all the debates. Everyone talking in circles beforehand, convincing only themselves of who should be in and their own points, just kind of, quite frankly, reverting to their priors on it. And we can all blame the ACC on this because the tie-breaking rules there, the fact that they went 0-2, having their champion in the 12-team playoff be anything beyond the 12 seed, with obviously their champion being left out this year. But having Florida State be bad, sorry, Charles, and the Syracuse-Boston College game be something that puts Duke in the ACC title game. I mean, it's just hilarious, how you end up with that. I mean, I'm for the generally speaking, I'm for the G5, like, access. It's hilarious they got 2 in this year based on the run out in the ACC specifically.
A team from the Sun Belt, man. Not the Mountain West, the Sun Belt.
Yeah, a bad version of the Sun Belt. The American was a good league this year. Like, that was the league we talked about all year, getting the G5 bid. Oh, by the way, I guess we were technically right on that. We called it out mid-season, JMU to the playoff. Because we
did. At like 8-1. So it's possible. Kudos to anybody that told us on that. Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously, so like everyone, I'm just happy we have games, point spreads to bet on. Obviously, I'm not writing I'm not breaking news here. Laying Oregon 21, I think is good. Laying Ole Miss is probably less good than Oregon is, but it's probably still good. I think both those point spreads go up. I do have Oregon around 24 in this game. I do have Ole Miss closer to 20. As far as my raw numbers go on that one. So it does kind of suck. And then another big takeaway I took away from this bracket kind of going forward, sorry, two more points. They don't care about rematches. We thought they might. They don't, because there's 2 of them. Obviously, you couldn't avoid Ole Miss Tulane, kind of how, because of James Madison and Duke and all that stuff. But they didn't mess around with Oklahoma and Alabama. Also, thankfully, people are realizing and catching up to my point that the weekly rating show means 0. So I'm glad that people are finally catching up to me on that one. Yesterday was the first one I paid attention to. Miami A&M, obviously very interesting. I know that one opened a little bit higher in that 5 ish, 4.5, 5 range. I did grab a little bite of Miami there in that one. I think that these teams are really closely rated in that one. So I think it ultimately trades in this 3.5, 4 range. Be interested to see where the total goes on that one. That's when we get to breaking down these games further, something I really want to be into. Both these quarterbacks obviously allow, potential interceptions in this one to throw their team out of the game as well with that one. And then Alabama, Oklahoma, obviously this one's gotten slammed under. I don't blame them. I am curious. I think the point spreads, the initial openers here is fine. Neither team should be a 3-point favorite. So just kind of figuring that out. Is Ty Simpson looked hurt, has continued to look hurt. Well, now he gets 15 days off, or so. So how does that help him kind of going into that? Does he recover? Does Alabama's offense look better? They did outgain Oklahoma by 150 yards in that first meeting. So that's something to watch for there. If Alabama, beats Oklahoma, plays to that, maybe that same yard advantage they had in the first meeting, be interesting what that market opens up against Indiana would be in the Rose Bowl in that one. And the other fact, as well, kind of going back to the first game, is if Oklahoma were to win and advance, I think that Oklahoma defensive line could give Indiana some trouble because Ohio State's defensive line did have some success against Indiana as well.
Right.
And one point I failed to make in that breakdown earlier was a lot of missed holds on both sides in that game. So there's that one. Those are the early thoughts right now on that one. But yeah, I do think that laying some of the big numbers are probably pretty good.
Hypothetical matchup between Miami and Ohio State. Just what are your immediate top of mind thoughts?
Probably lined between 7 and 10 there. I think that's I have not run that one to check on my end. Again, 2 defensive lines. Matt Patricia probably going to put Carson Beck in a blender is my first thought in that one.
Yeah, I would think immediately look under. Right?
Yeah, 2 coaches that love the turtle.
It seems like it would get very conservative. Even on the fast track, it's indoors. I think that the total would probably open too high in that one and most likely be bet under.
Yeah.
Because of what you just said, the conservative nature of both coaches, but also, Julian Sayin, that didn't look right. And obviously Indiana was the best defense he's played all season. And I say that knowing they played Texas week 1, and obviously they played Michigan. But under the lights, big time game, he didn't look.
I thought Ohio State's game plan was just so poor.
Yeah. It definitely didn't do anything to make you confident that offense is going to find that gear that it found last year. And maybe Chip Kelly, it was the solve. And now with Hartline going to USF, and again, man, like the way the college football works with everything up in the air kind of in December, while these important games are still going on, I'm just not sure about Ohio State. It's more like I lost so much confidence in Ohio State and what that team was able to do last year to this year and everything we discussed. Just going into this playoff game or this whole playoff race now for the rest of the season, whether they get matched up with Texas A&M or Miami, obviously both teams are live, and I would not have thought that last year.
An example of the play calling I mentioned, I think it was on the drive that Sayin had the knee down on the sneak, the third down, I believe. They closing my eyes because I had to see it because they snapped the ball. Sayin's right-handed. They rolled to the left, and it was a one-man route where I think it was Jeremiah Smith ran an out route, but it was just a one-man route, one read, and threw it away, and that was your third and 1 call. You obviously probably knew you were going for. I believe this is. I'm correct on the drive, but that was right before you sneaked it. Probably knew you were going to sneak it, but why give your guy just one? Like there was no outs there. There was nothing there, and you've been pressured all night. Why roll your quarterback to the left on his weak side on that? So just an example of like what the hell was Ohio State doing?
You haven't had success running the ball. You're not getting a push with the. I mean,
snap call. What's the final?
With
asking you a question.
Yeah, with which team?
Who's playing for the national title? Snap call. I'm asking you.
Georgia, Indiana. And Indiana wins it.
Oh, there you go.
Only because
I'll still go Ohio State. I'll go Ohio State over Oregon right now.
I would say that, man, Cignetti's ability to adapt and in-game play calling, it's pretty rock solid, man. The guy's got the nuts.
Speaking to your Georgia point, FanDuel, I know, and I haven't bet anything yet in this market. FanDuel did have some exactas in there, and I do think like at price, I was kind of looking at and considering like Georgia Oregon combos.
Do you know what those? Let's pull up to see what they pay.
I think if you parlayed them to just make the title game, it was around 10-1, and then picking either winner was like 18 or 19-1. Just like one of them was one way.
Gotcha.
Like Georgia to beat Oregon or vice versa. I thought those were interesting. Put it that way.
Any that you saw particular value in outside of just Georgia, Oregon?
That was all I glanced at. Someone asked me about that market earlier, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. I got to look into this later." Later hasn't happened yet.
Gotcha.
Just to be honest.
While I'm fumbling through this, any other thoughts on the playoff bracket or potential matchups?
Nothing down the line right now. Under in Oregon, Texas Tech is going to be interesting, but that'll be that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one where you don't have to convince me at all. Just say the two teams, and my immediate thought also is under. Here are those exactas that you were talking about over at FanDuel. So Ohio State to beat Indiana is actually the odds-on favorite at plus 500. Indiana to beat Ohio State is plus 600. But as we get down the board here, Georgia to beat Indiana plus 1,100. And as we get further down the line, Georgia to beat Oregon plus 1,700. Oregon to beat Georgia plus 1,900. Obviously, this is a really fun market and a really fun way to play the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's something to look at, especially if you think there's variance. And like how you said, if you think Ohio State is potentially vulnerable in that second game, that would be an initial thought, is to maybe look and see what those are. Obviously, like these markets are just easier to price because we kind of know the top of the board and how these teams kind of rank and should be priced. So they are just derivatives of that. There's not going to be something, mathematically crazily off or anything, but it's just an additional way to play it if those kind of ways to bet interest you.
Absolutely. So, Bobby, enough about the playoff. There are actually other games that go on during the during December, and you might remember those as bowl games. So, Bobby, with all of, I think, what was it, like 11 teams that decided to opt out, like, hey, we're not interested, which is just wild to me. Quick thoughts on that are, I had a buddy that played in the Orange Bowl for Iowa against Carson Palmer's USC team. Yeah, so way back, time machine back early 2000s. And I just remember him talking about like they got like a PlayStation and like a watch and some cool swag. And that got those guys really excited. Now you fast forward to 2025, and now these guys are making, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. That swag bag ain't it anymore. Right. And if you're going to get these guys to show up and play, it's actually going to take some money. And these guys are going to need to be cut in on the bowl system. With that in mind, what is your bowl betting process? I mean, how are you approaching bowl season? What are your thoughts on bowl season? How closely are you watching, obviously, opt-outs? Last year, I'm not even sure. I feel like it's kind of up to not just game day. We weren't sure who was going to play. That's obviously going to impact how you handicap this. Right. So how do you think about it? And then how quickly do you react? Is this just a situation where you're watching the screen and you're trying to get in and get down at your book before the odds move, or how do you play bowl season?
Yeah. So my numbers froze effectively for the non-playoff teams plus Army Navy. at the end of the regular season, or Saturday, for whatever 100 teams or whatever it is. So I won't move those until I go to update for next year. For each bowl, I'll make like an unadjusted number. I'll call it like a raw number. Whereas if each team played, call it last Saturday, right? As we knew them that date, right? So if they were to play on, I'll just say December 1st because it's easier to say. But if they played on December 1st, this is what the number would be. And then as we get, information of opt-outs, injuries, coaching changes, just all other assorted factors, I'm basically going to go like, is this enough? I did bet some bowl game openers where I'm kind of just like, quite frankly, just blind guessing, like motivation and things like that. And then now once you get beyond that, it's just waiting for the information. But kind of just using this one game as an example, USF, Old Dominion, I think is a great example of this. My number, if both teams were playing this game on December 1st, is basically USF -7. Now we have ODU quarterback Colton Joseph in the portal. We don't know for sure if he's going to play. We saw some guys who said they were going to transfer, but then did play the bowl game. So we don't know. USF, that is a huge downgrade if Old Dominion were to go to the backup.
Right.
So yeah, I'm on market here with that. Showing 6.5. We have USF without a coach. Galesh went to Auburn. So that's obviously a high tempo pro offense team. Is Byron Brown, the quarterback at UCF, going to play? I don't know. You don't either. Maybe other opt-outs, transfers. Is the interim staff going to push the tempo if it's a backup quarterback and all that stuff? So this, clearly, like from that adjusted number, like the side to me shows that it's not adjusted, that it's as if Joseph's playing for ODU, etc. That's kind of how I see it right now. I actually, with this game, I actually like the total. I did take some under here, kind of based on those factors. I don't know if UCF runs some tempo. It's speculative. I'm betting these bowls unless I have info, for much less than I do sides or totals in the season at this point, because it is just kind of a guess. But I do think that's kind of what I'm doing now. These aren't like any other markets. These are much closer to NBA or NFL preseason
Right.
and whatnot. Shout out to Stuckey of the Action Network. He does a great article that lists all the injuries, opt-outs. I use that as I'm kind of going through the process of that. If I'm in front of a screen, when an opt-out occurs, I make a snap decision. Do I want to bet a game, etc. on that? And bowls are so much harder. I mean, we're getting really close to NBA regular season levels of players and teams just don't give a shit.
Right.
It's not quite NBA levels, but close.
No, I'd say it's there. I mean,
So.
I was shocked that teams are willing to be fined to not go to a bowl game. I mean, Iowa State and Kansas State are both going to pay $500,000 to not play in a bowl game.
The 5 and 7 teams, is whatever, because you thought your season was over at Thanksgiving. So like you've packed up the locker room, like that's whatever to me. I don't care if Kansas State and Iowa State turn down a bowl game. Same thing with Notre Dame. Like that doesn't bother me personally. It's like kind of just to me, it's just like, oh, this has been coming for some time.
Correct. It's more of a confirmation of what we've been thinking. It's just wild to see it historically, because historically these guys have played in bowl games. I know my entire life watching bowl games is just what you do in December. It's something to look forward to. A lot of good memories of watching these bowl games. And then now how many more years do you think we have of bowl games? I mean, over under, let's say.
Was it 2031? Is when all the TV contracts are up.
Yeah, I mean, is that like when it is? Because I was going to say 5 seasons. So. 5 seasons will be when it's over.
Yeah, I mean, it's for, a lot of them are owned by ESPN, so they use them to fill time during the holidays. To me, those can be replaced with college basketball, and be fine. At the end of the day, it's just whatever they want. I mean, people will bet on them. Quite frankly, it's for the gambling. But like, honestly, like like if you either have the information or you don't. I've said that out of a couple different markets, recently with that. So it's really hard to bet these bowl games now, and you either have the bet them early, kind of anticipating opt-outs, or you get the information, bet them during the information, or you bet them at close when you have all the information and you're better at evaluating it. So that's just kind of up to what you think you're capable of. But
right.
I don't. It's just not as much. It's just not as a fun market to bet as it used to be. Unfortunately, I remember used to doing bowl pools when I was throughout college, cleaning up on those every year when they were fun. But now no one does a bowl confidence pool.
Right. I mean, this has just totally changed from when you and I were coming up. Bowl confidence pools were awesome, and as we're talking, you can see that South Florida just went to 5. I mean, these odds are still on the move, and Twitter's your best friend during bowl season. Definitely turn your notifications on so that you can follow guys like Duck, for example, and get those key updates and insights as far as where these numbers might go.
The other thing too is like in a game like ODU, and there's a couple others, North Texas, San Diego State's one, where that's one that's just like, listen, I don't know the motivation for the favorites here because of coaching changes, all that. Like, I don't care about the points. Like, I'm way more apt in these situations just to take the dog. Like, I haven't bet these sides, but like, I'm way more apt to take dog money line and not bet the 3 or 3.5 in San Diego State's case or anything like that. I'm way more apt to do that.
You would make this point typically that how about familiarity with venue? I mean, San Diego State just played New Mexico in the last game of the regular season. Now they're in the New Mexico Bowl. Like, they know the venue much better than North Texas. So this is a team that's comfortable. Obviously, they had a great season. They went over the season win total, right?
Who?
San Diego State.
Both of them did.
Yeah. And then, like you're saying, with Morris leaving North Texas to go to Oklahoma State, it just kind of the whole staff's looking for jobs. One thing I'd like for you to touch on, and this is purely speculative, and I know we're going very long, but this is just fun to talk about. The idea of a G5 national championship, and does the death of bowl season coincide to a Super League?
I do think we eventually get to a Super League. I went to Akron. We talk about so I root for a G5 team quite a bit here. So I do think the G5 does deserve access to the playoff if they are going to be considered in the same class as, meaning FBS, as the other teams. Because that would be kind of messed up if, like, I used this example in a conversation earlier, but a 12-0 MAC team can go undefeated in all iterations before the 12-team playoff, go undefeated. Right. And if they didn't have a good strength of schedule, they still weren't being number 2 in the BCS, number 1 in the AP poll before that. And it took the Cincinnati team with a bunch of NFL players. They were ranked preseason. They had to go to South Bend and beat Notre Dame. And they barely got in with the 4 seed the year they made it and went undefeated. So I do think that if they are considered FBS with the other teams, they deserve some pathway to the playoff and therefore like path to a national championship, even if they are in a different class.
Right.
So if that means G5 playoff or Super League and some of the teams move up to whatever the Power 2, whatever that it becomes, and some of them go to FCS and all that, as long as they have a pathway to win a national championship, I think that is ultimately fair. And I do think we end up kind of with that, whether it's 3 subdivisions, being the second being like the G5, FCS, and then Super League or whatever. But as long as that happens, I do. That's where I think we end up, and I think that's fine. Whatever. It's in this case, in that particular case, like, my opinion doesn't matter. I think we're going to end up there. I'm not going to be a cause for change or anything, though.
No, I think it brings up a great point about how this is turning much more into European soccer. And if anybody's unfamiliar with relegation, it seems like with the
no one's
advent,
going down. They ain't going to do that.
uh
Not like year to year. Not like
you're
that.
right. But if somebody has to move up, somebody has to move out. It seems like they would probably rig it somehow where the same type of G5 schools would just switch in and out. But I would think that some of them would actually, like a Memphis or a South Florida, which are continuing
I
to
think it'd be
invest in their
sad.
program, would be able to stick around. I don't know, man. It
Yeah.
seems like that model would make the most sense for college football.
Yeah, I mean, we got 136, so what, 68 aside there. So I think you're going to get a static 68 per, and that's just how it's going to split.
We've already touched on it a little bit, but definitely wanted to make sure we get all of your thoughts on the point spreads for the playoff games. So just to recap, Alabama is currently a 1.5 point favorite at FanDuel, but Sports 401 has Oklahoma the favorite with a total of 40.5. James Madison catching 3 or more touchdowns at Oregon with a total of 50.5. Ole Miss currently laying 17 with a total of 57 against Tulane. And then Miami catching 3.5 to 4 points with a total of 51.5.
Yeah, outside of liking the two favorites in the big games, especially Oregon, I don't have much thoughts on anything to do with them right now. Like I said, Alabama between the threes is fine, or Alabama, Oklahoma between the threes is fine. Totals obviously come down a touch. We'll wait for information there. And I want to look at the Miami A&M total. I'm interested where that one goes. Side is fine, and that I think it lives in the 3.5, 4 range.
If you're worried that there wasn't football on Saturday, you'd be wrong, because we do have Army-Navy on Saturday in addition to the LA Bowl. But we'll keep this show historical. Army-Navy is always a great game on the Saturday post-championship weekend. So, Bobby, any immediate thoughts on Army-Navy?
Yeah, my number in the game, market, if you're looking at it now, is basically like 6, 6.5, and 38.5. My number in this game is 6.5, 7 in this game, in favor of Navy. So I do think this is kind of where we close, and all that. We've been against Army a few times this year. I do think Navy is obviously a stronger team. I lean that way in the game. Both teams obviously have below average defenses, specifically against the pass. Not that that matters much in this matchup. However, Blake Horvath, Navy, they can pass a little bit. Definitely the more competent passer there. Additionally, Army outside of the top 100 defensive rush success rate, without a doubt. Like, I do think Navy wins here. That's pretty decent, and that they're the better team. I also actually lean over 38.5 too. So, but not rushing to bet that. You'll anticipate the typical Service Academy under steam maybe to come in. Maybe later in the week, and see if that gets down, and maybe I pizza bet that for something, because we want to have action on America's game. But that's it for me on that one.
What would this total have to get to? I'm thinking 37. Is it something you'd have to get to for you to click the over button?
37 is would absolutely be an over bet for sure.
Gotcha. Any chance? I mean, with the total this low, there's no way this gets to 7, right? This probably the side stays where it's at.
Yeah, I think it does stay that. I do think there'd probably be some Army buyers at 7. I think the 6.5 is just, it seems right to me.
You can follow Bobby at BobbyDigital2 on Twitter. You can follow the show at CFB900. Bobby and I will be back here Wednesday, December 17th, doing our normal big game breakdowns. We will go through all 4 of the playoff games. As we have random bowl thoughts, we will certainly share them on Twitter. As we have any sort of leans or plays, who knows? Bobby and I may decide we're just going to play every bowl game and just give out a lean just to have some action. Yeah, I like your face there, Bobby. Who knows? Why not, right? Let's make this fun, or maybe potentially find some head-to-heads. Make this, hey, Bobby, this might be the last bowl season ever. Who knows? So let's make it count. But Bobby and I will be back here December 17th for sure. Same time, big game breakdown, going through all of the playoff matchups. And then in the subsequent week, it'll be post-Christmas as the playoff resumes the 31st and the 1st. So we're kind of targeting the 29th maybe for that big game breakdown show. So until then, enjoy Army-Navy. Enjoy betting some degenerate bowl games. Best of luck to you. Adios.